I'm going to go over the basic features of Scratch that need to be included in your computational thinking assignment. So to start, if you go to the actual assignment on Canvas, your Scratch game, if you scroll down to the rubric, you'll see the different things that you need to incorporate. I'm going to keep referencing this as the video goes on. So the first thing you need to include are sprites. When you open up Scratch, you'll see your sprites are over here. Sprites is just another word that Scratch uses basically for your characters. There are four main ways you can include a sprite. If you click this icon of it's like a little fairy guy, you can choose one of the images they already have. You can use this pencil or this paintbrush, sorry, to draw your own, which will look like this, and then you can draw in whatever kind of sprite you want. You can upload an image from your computer, or you can actually take one using your webcam. So for this video, I'm going to choose a sprite from their library so you can see. So in my sprite, I'm going to choose this beetle. Or in my Scratch, I'm going to choose this beetle. Okay. Anytime you have a sprite that you no longer want to use or you want to get rid of, if you click it and then right click, you can go ahead and delete. And if you're doing this on a Mac, I believe what you need to do is click with two fingers as the right click equivalent. So I'm going to get rid of this cat. If you ever need to change how your sprite looks, if you go to costumes, you can change the size, its original orientation, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes on Scratch, their sprites have different costumes. So when you click costumes where this beetle is, there would be actually other beetles that look different. It's still the same sprite. It can just have different looks. So that's something to be aware of. The next thing you need to include is a conditional statement. So conditional statements can be found if you go to scripts. Anytime you are trying to give a specific sprite instructions, you need to be under scripts and you need to have that sprite selected. Conditional statements are underneath control. Control is basically what you use to give your sprite, it's the way that you control what your sprite is doing. And I hate to use the word control in that definition, but this is really the basics of when your sprite knows what it should be doing and how long it should be doing it for. So we're going to focus on the conditional statement aspect of that, which is if something happens, then something else is going to happen. So I will revisit this in a minute, but you'll notice in this if-then statement, we have this blank here. So if something happens, then something else is going to happen. So I'm going to say if, let's see, if I go to sensing, if this sprite is touching the mouse pointer, and there are a whole bunch of options you can have here, you can drop down, but and there are other options you can use as you get better. But I'm going to say if this sprite is touching my mouse, then I want it to I want my x to change by 10. I'm going to change x by 30 so we can see a more drastic difference. Now, even though I put this in, my sprite doesn't know when it needs to do this. So I'm going to go back into events, and I believe this is another thing you need to have when this loads. We can double check. But basically, events is how you get your sprite started. So whether that's clicking the green flag or pushing the space key, clicking the sprite, there's a whole bunch of things. I'm going to just say when this green flag is clicked, if my beetle is touching the mouse pointer, it's going to change by x, or it's going to change x by 30. Now, I'm going to show you guys something really quickly. This isn't going to work, and I'm going to talk about why in a minute. When I click this green flag, I've just touched my beetle, but you can see that my beetle is not moving. That is because when you read this script, and when this sprite looks at the script, it's taking it very literally. So it's saying it is only going to change x by 30 if right as that green flag is clicked, it's touching my mouse pointer. This isn't really possible because anytime I'm clicking this green flag, there's no way that I'm also touching my beetle with the mouse pointer. So under control, I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually use this. I'm going to put all of this inside a forever loop. This means that anytime after this green flag has been clicked, as long as my mouse pointer touches it, it'll change my X by 30. Or at least it should. Let's see. Okay, so it wasn't working at first, but it's because I had clicked this. So now that I've touched my green flag, you'll see when I touched it, it moved. And I actually ended up moving him all the way up the screen. So I'm going to now click my stop sign and move him back. But that's basically how an if-then statement works, where if something is happening, then something else is going to happen. And a lot of times, make sure if you're having issues at first, it's often because your event, you need to put a forever loop around it. So now I've touched on two different things. We have our events, which is what we use to get anything started, and I have my control that has my conditional statement. The next thing we need to talk about is our look blocks. If you go to looks, this basically is how we change what our sprite looks like, in the sense that our sprite can say things. That is the biggest thing you can use here. So a lot of times this is how you can make a sprite talk. So under look, I might say hello for 2 seconds when the green flag is clicked. And then when I click my green flag, it says hello. I would suggest anytime you add an additional script or code to your sprite, you test it out as soon as you do it. This makes it a lot easier to find problems within your sprite, within your Scratch game earlier on. Because if I built all of this and then I was clicking the green flag and something wasn't working, I would need to go through every individual piece of code until I found that issue. So as you can see, as the length of my code builds, it's really useful to make sure you test out every single thing as soon as you add it. Besides making your sprite say something for either a timed amount or just saying it, you can change the costume, which I talked about. Remember, this beetle only has one costume, but if it had multiple, you could change it. And looks can change the size of your sprite. The last thing you can do is show or hide. This is really useful if you don't want a sprite visible right away. So I might say when I click on my sprite, so I would go back into event source, like when the space key is pressed, I'm going to hide my sprite. So I just click my space bar and now my beetle is gone. However, when I click the green flag, my beetle shows up again. So show and hide, whether or not your sprite is visible, you can find here, which is really useful based on different events you have. So there's how the look blocks work. So we've talked about conditional statements, look blocks, our starting method, which remember is what events do. And now we need to use a sound block. So if we go to sound, this just allows you to play different sounds. They have a variety of sounds for you to choose from. You can record a sound, or they have one, a pop sound that you can use. So I might say when it's clicked, it's going to play a pop sound when he shows up. And you can change how long it plays for and how loud it is. So that's how the sound block works. Pretty self-explanatory. Next, we need a loop block. And you'll see here, this is under control, repeat or forever. Now, I used a forever earlier over here. You can see I said when that green flag is clicked, anytime my mouse touches that beetle, it's going to move. You can also use a repeat block. So this is the same thing. This is another type of loop, but instead of going forever, I can choose how many times I want it to repeat. So something I might do is drag out my repeat, and I'm going to just start a different event so we can see. So I might say, let's see, when I press any key, I want my sprite to say, wow. And it'll say it 10 times. Well, this was a bad example, so actually I don't want to say something. I could say when any key is pressed, if we go to motion, my beetle is going to move 10 steps, but that's going to be repeated 10 times. Like I said, we want to test that. I said hello. Now I can push any key. It's just moved 10 steps 10 times. And that's kind of hard to see because it looks like it just slid for a certain amount of time and then stopped. But what it was doing is moving 10 and then 10 again and 10 again. And it repeated it 10 times. So it looked like one big long motion. That isn't the best example of when you want to use a repeat, but that is one of the more simple and basic ways that you can use it. But basically, the important thing to know is under control, there are two types of loops that you can do. You can do a forever loop, where it will just keep going and going and going, or you can do a repeat loop, where it will only repeat it, it will only loop your script or your code as many times as you tell it to. Now, the last thing we need to talk about is motion, which you actually just saw me use when I used my move. Motion is just like what it sounds like. It's how you make your sprite move. Now, I would suggest instead of using the move block, which you'll see here, actually using your change X and change Y script. This is because Sprite is set up on, Scratch is set up on a coordinate plane. So you can see these X and Y values down here. This actually tracks the X and Y value of my mouse. And if you ever need the X and Y values or coordinates of your sprites, you go over here. It's telling me right now my beetle is at X is -1 and Y is -23. Now, the reason I say to do your motion using that is because it gives you a lot more control. You'll see when I said move 10 steps, I didn't get to pick the direction that my sprite moved. Scratch automatically says when it moves 10 steps, it will only move to the right, pretty much. What might be better is to change your X and Y values. So this is useful because you can actually set something up like with your arrow keys. So I could say when my up arrow key is pressed, I'm going to just get rid of this. I would change my X by 10, which as we know on a coordinate plane, so actually instead of my up arrow key, I'm going to do my right arrow key. Because on a coordinate plane, as you move right, it means your X values are increasing. So you could change this and you change X by -10 when I push my left arrow key, or you could even use your Y value. So if I push the up arrow, obviously my Y would change by +10, and if I push my down arrow, Y would change by -10. So just so you guys can see one more example. So I could say when my left arrow is pushed, it'll change by -10, and now I'll demonstrate that. So I'm going to push my right arrow key, you'll see it's moving, and when I push my left arrow key, it's moving. Now you can also give your sprite movement by just telling it to go to a specific spot. So say I want to start in the same spot every time my game starts. So you'll see if I move him way over here, when I push the green arrow, it goes to the coordinates I just gave it. But I can always change that by moving my left and right arrow keys, which is what I'm pushing right now, which we defined over here. So those are the main blocks that you're going to be looking at. Definitely take some time to explore how each of those blocks and these scripts work. If you get stuck, there's usually a lot of tutorials that you can Google, but those are the basics. I would definitely say, though, the more you explore with Scratch, the more comfortable you're going to be with it, and the easier it's going to be to manipulate these scripts in your different sprites. Oh, one last thing I want to talk about really quickly is just changing your backdrop. Backdrops are down here to the left, just like sprites. We're on a plain white backdrop, but it works the same way the sprites do, where if I just click backdrop here, this is my one, but I can choose from backdrops they have. I can draw a new one, I can upload to my computer, or I can take a picture, and then anytime I want to edit it, it'll just be here. My first backdrop, if I added a second one, let's say I added the sky in, this would be my second one, and I can click between the two of them and change them however I want. So that's how Scratch works, kind of those basic features. I didn't go over every single script just because some of them can get a little bit complex, but those are the most important ones you want to know about. Operators are great if you're doing any type of math. Sensing is great if you need your sprite to be able to sense either the edge of it or different colors and stuff. But other than that, that's really the only things I didn't talk about that you might need to use.